Welcome to the new episode of Ready and Willing podcast. And today I've got Josh Simons with me, who's the Makerfield MP, new to the area. We want to know who Josh is and what he's about. Hi Josh, thanks for coming. And,
my pleasure, Chris.
Thanks for spending the time. Firstly, who's Josh Simons?
God, I ask myself that question all the time. I've got a complicated background because my parents divorced at quite a young age. My dad is from Bury, and my mum was born in Bristol and grew up just outside Cambridge. She's got Scottish parents, and then my dad's parents are Bury Jews. So I grew up going between different places and different houses. And quite a big part of who I am is that I moved between very different worlds. You know, they were quite aggressive, blunt, northern Jewish family on the one side, and then, you know, slightly more upright, kind of Presbyterian Scots on the other. And as a young kid, when you move between those worlds and you learn to be at home in both of them, you kind of learn different worlds, you know, Bath and Bath, how you talk, also how you behave. So a big part of my childhood was being in more than one family at the same time from quite different cultural backgrounds.
That's quite interesting, and that's something that people wouldn't know. So naturally, you hit the boards running in July, coming into Makerfield in C. Got a deep history of MPs, Ian McCartney, Yvonne, so big shoes to fill in a way. I think you've hit the boards running. I've seen lots of stuff that you've been doing. Lots of issues have been raised, and how have you found that? How have you found the people of Makerfield?
Well, one of the things I learned pretty fast about Makerfield is that no one knows that they're in Makerfield. I mean, it's such a weird thing. I learned this when I was researching for my maiden speech, that Makerfield is actually the name of an ancient forest that stretched all the way from Wigan to Warrington. And then it became a suffix of the towns, you know, Ashton, Ince. But actually, nobody in that area really knows that they're in Makerfield or whatever that is. And in a way, it's sort of Wigan South, or the towns in the south of Wigan. So I've stopped really using, you know, I've stopped really saying that. I'll say the towns in Makerfield or the towns I represent. Because I actually think that, you know, when you say the issues I'm hearing in Makerfield, people go, what? So I've stopped doing that. But the fantastic thing about the seat is it's got a history of really good campaigning MPs. You know, Yvonne campaigned really hard for that health centre in Ashton and got that delivered. And then, of course, she did that in a context where there was no Labour government for her to work with. And then Ian, who I've been speaking to a lot lately about how you work with a Labour government to get stuff done for the area, you know, in Plattbridge, Ashton, you know, he did a lot for the area that was about delivering, you know, particular, very visible local projects. Yeah. And for me, that's the test, because we've got a Labour government now. Trust in politics is incredibly low. And I found this in virtually every town that I've spent time in and knocked doors in. People think that politicians like me go down to Westminster, not exactly sure what they do for 3 days, but they sort of fuff around. And it doesn't really make much difference visibly and in tangible ways to the area. And so my view about my own test for myself is, at the end of this 4-year period, in every town that I represent, something's got to feel different. There's got to be something visible, something tangible, something that people can really feel that is different about the area. And if we achieve that, then we can demonstrate what happens when you have a Labour government backing up a Labour mayor and a Labour council. But if we don't achieve that, then people will quite rightly think, what is the point in voting for a, you know, Labour government at a general election? So that is the thing that keeps me up at night, is the people whose voices I hear when I go down to Westminster. They need to see and feel that something's changed about their area, not just the national economy or GDP figures or whatever, but something in Hindley Green, in Ashton, in Plattbridge, in Orrell. Something in those towns has to change.
And all those areas you spoke about are unique neighbourhoods within themselves. So
exactly.
Wigan's a bit like that, isn't it? So it's all that close-knit stuff. So it's kind of breaking that mould and getting the trust of people. And it looks like you've started to do that, to be quite honest. People are coming, you can see that feedback through. You've also got a network of MPs. So that's, you've got Joe Platt, Lisa Nandy, yourself. That's always been the success, working with the council, with Dave Molyneux and the cabinet, which I'm on, and working us all together as that team and making it strong. I remember going down to Westminster with Andy Burnham, Ian McCartney, Lord Peter Smith, and it was kind of really close-knit. It was the Wigan Brigade that brought it all together. Can we bring that back to what it was and make it powerful?
Well, I really hope so. I mean, it's one of the things that I have already learned to grow and to love and see about Wigan is it's the MP's relationship with each other it's the MP's relationship with the council, but it's also the way that the council works with the community. You know, it's Lisa's done over many years an incredible job of really telling the story of the Wigan deal and what happened and why it was so important in that area, in that period. And we're now in a new era now of progress with unity. But I think to give you a specific example, the flooding.
Yeah.
As many people know, in both Plattbridge and Ashton and a little bit in Hindley, we had really awful floods on New Year's Eve, and it was probably the thing that's defined my experience as a newly elected MP. Initially, the response to that was anger. You know, it was fury. I spoke to Andy Burnham, who as the MP for Hindley and Hindley Green, had seen floods when he was the MP there, and people thought, well, this happened before. Nothing's been done. Why is it happening again? You know, once again, nobody is listening to us.
Yeah.
But what that's turned into, I had a fantastic meeting recently where all of the different agencies had come together to update on what they've been doing in the last 2 months. And it is now genuinely a completely different way of working with Greater Manchester Combined Authority, with the council, with United Utilities and the Environment Agency. They are all coming together to say, usually we all do our own separate thing and we do it to the community. Now we're all going to do, you know, the same thing in lockstep with each other, and we're going to crucially do it with the community. And in all of the areas that were flooded, pretty much, there's now been these flood action groups that are set up, and these are community led. It's people from the community who are leading these groups. They're taking minutes, they're writing down actions, they're keeping in touch with the council, and that is the great strength of Wigan, is that the communities are resilient and strong, and when things happen that need to be solved, they come together and they organise and they solve them.
You could say, in a way, you've come in at a good time or a bad time, because in power, you've got to make the decisions, which sometimes are not popular. In opposition, you can just blame the government. So when I've dealt with MPs in the past, they've said, oh, it's crazy. We're in opposition. We can't make a difference. Now you're in power. You can make a difference. How were you finding that when you went down to Westminster, first day of opening that door and going, wow?
Oh, well, I have to say that Westminster is a weird place. You know, what happens in that building in Parliament, there's lots of rats.
Maybe we don't need to know what happens in there.
Well, it's honestly, lifting the lid, I think, is a good thing, because, you know, you see it on those TV screens and it all looks a bit surreal. But the reality of it is, I would say, I don't know, half, maybe a bit less than that. 1 in 3 Mondays I go in the morning and the toilet doesn't flush properly. In the place where I eat most days, there's massive rats that scuttle across the middle of it. And, you know, a lot of it's quite dysfunctional. But...
Them are rats, not politicians.
Both.
Yeah, okay.
One is sort of a signal of the other. The rats remind the politicians that if they're not careful, they're coming for them. But what it does very well is that people, constituency MPs, really care about their places. They really care about their people. And when they do a good job, they have spent the weekend before listening to residents. Every month at the moment, I'm holding these coffee mornings. And, you know, the number of people who come in varies, but we've had minimum sort of 30, 40, and we've had over 100 people at some of them. And that is a really powerful thing, because it means I spend 3 hours, not just listening on a sort of intellectual level, but actually feeling the emotions of the people I represent. And that sticks with you on the Monday. And the good thing about Parliament is that you really have a chance to stand up for and fight for your area there. But in order to make that relationship work when you're in power, to your question, Chris, you have to show people that along with the difficult decisions, you know, along with keeping the nation's finances in good health and, you know, preparing for a really insecure, frightening world, you get things. You get tangible, specific things done. And that's why, you know, those visible projects that I was talking about earlier, that's why they're so important. Because if all you get from a Labour government is tough decisions, then, you know, why should people vote for a Labour government?
Yeah.
If you get tough decisions, but you also get really tangible improvements to your area, that's a whole different ballgame.
I suppose key, and I've spoke about this quite a lot, is naturally you're down in Parliament, you'll go down Monday, come back Thursday if you're lucky, maybe Friday. Your office is key to what goes on in that community, because people won't see you on that days, but if they can go into their office and actually see people and things get done, that's your key to success, is having a successful office.
That's completely right, Chris. I mean, I would say it's your office and also your relationships with your councillors.
Yeah.
You know, we have an incredible Labour-led council here, and that working together as a unit, that is your outreach into the community. You know, good councillors know their community like the back of their hands. It's their life.
Yeah.
And the MP's office is always going to be caught between Westminster and coming back, even the team that are here. So, but yeah, I'm a bit of a nerd for having good, well-run teams. I love, good teamwork, having a culture of trust, people really getting to know how to work with each other. We have things like weekly one-on-one meetings.
Okay.
I won't, your eyes will glaze over when I get too into this, but I think that teams working well is the essence of all good things in politics. And people think of politics as quite an individual thing. You see a politician on the telly and they're their own person and this, that, and the other. Every really great politician is also a good team leader. And they care about their staff. They care about how the team works together. And I'm very lucky. I have a couple of members of my team who worked for the last MP for a long period. So there's some really good continuity there. And then there are new members of my team. And we all work really closely together. We have 2 team meetings a week. We all talk to each other about casework, about issues that are coming up online, offline. And as a result of that, the number of people that we can reach and help and listen to and talk to every week is, sometimes it's slightly, I sort of go to bed on a Friday and think, God, that's a lot of lives that I've had a relationship with. And that's a huge weight of responsibility. If you think about some conversation you had 2 weeks ago and you think, oh God, what happened to that, ladies' child support case? Yeah. You wake up thinking about it, but when you've got a great team, you then go back to the team and say, what did happen about that lady's case? And they've got an answer for you and the work's been done. And that is really, really important.
So one of the things we have been talking about with other people is sport. And sport is so important to people of this borough. Not only the people who play sport, but actually the mental health of people and everything that goes on it, whether it's amateur sport or whatever. So I've seen you taking an interest in Wigan Warriors, and I know you're interested in Wigan Athletics. So are you making that connection there? I think you know Mike Danson, don't you? So I've had some conversations with Mike over different stuff, and we're really grateful that Mike's come in and saved the football and carried on the continuity of the rugby.
This is my big secret, and you're going to get it first, Chris. I used to play a lot of rugby when I was growing up, but it was union.
Okay.
So for my sins. But it has meant that, I miss passing a rugby ball about, and, I was always the slightly sort of chunky-thighed, cumbersome second row. So the transition, I did actually play league a few times, but I was not always deft enough on my feet in my early years anyway, to be that good at league. But I miss, passing a ball around and playing, and I know the sport very, very well. I was a qualified referee for a while, and I used to referee kids. So I miss doing that, and having the chance to reconnect and do that again is actually just fantastic, and it's making me really happy. And, it is so obvious to me that Wigan as a place, right down to the grassroots clubs like, St. Jude's in my patch, for example, that suffer from a big antisocial behaviour problem. It's such a big part of what makes people tick. And I think it's an amazing thing. We're a really active borough, and that is a really, really important thing for healthcare, for the borough and so on. So anything I can ever do to support not just, the big clubs, and we're also extremely lucky in the borough that we have the Secretary of State for Sport, Lisa, and she's out there championing Wigan as a place for doing that. But also in my patch, the grassroots, really local clubs where, you have elderly walking rugby games and walking football games. And then you also have kids, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, who are training there every weekend. Those are really important community assets. And it is completely vital for me as the MP to respect those, but also protect them and make sure they get the funding, the protection from antisocial behaviour that they deserve, so that they can continue to be community assets in the 5, 10, 15 years to come.
So Joe Fitz at St Jude's is stalwart. Been there, I think, forever and a day, Joe. I've known Joe a long time. And I know
he was my first endorser on any ever leaflet. Joe.
Good.
He will always have a special place in my heart.
and he was gutted with what went on with the ASB stuff. And that does happen from time to time. We know that. But they've come from that and the building. So it's not like sit back and forget about it. They're doing it. So I think that's the resilience. And I know the ward councillors have worked closely on that as well with yourself.
Absolutely.
One of the things I probably want to touch on is the levelling up funding. So that's the levelling up funding for Ashton, which will be kind of in your patch. The last government kind of put the promises in place. But the truth is, there was no money there. So straight away in government, it's like, we've got to stall this. So in Wigan, all our arts stopped a bit. It was like, All, Ashton, Lee, and we're thinking, and so thanks to yourself, Lisa and Joe, who went in there and made sure that money came back into the borough. I think a lot of people would just say, it was already there. I know it wasn't.
Exactly.
The shell was there, but the shell was empty. And I think that's what for us. So thanks for that, and we look forward to kind of the developments at Ashton with all of that.
No, and that was a great example, Chris, of the MPs working together with the council as a unit to make a shared case into government, and it it worked. And I think it's an interesting example that you say, because I've heard that on the doorstep too. Well, that wasn't you lot got nothing to do with that.
Yeah.
It was the Conservative government. It's actually really hard in this day and age to
prove.
get messages out to people. Despite the fact that Wigan Today and Wigan Observer and Charles Graham, they do a great job, readership has gone down over the years. We all know that social media is a very fragmented space. So getting messages out there about what you're actually doing to on behalf of people, it's really difficult. And even when there's really big, tangible things like the flooding, like I'm campaigning at the moment for a road to connect the M6 and M61, health centres, these sort of big campaigns. In fact, I was chatting to Ian McCartney about this a few weeks ago. In his day, he was telling me he could show up to the Hindley Labour Club, and there would be, 60, 70 people there. And they would just be there chatting, having a pint, and he could sort of go around and update people on what he'd be doing. And he didn't have to sort of create that space.
Yeah.
Now there are so few public spaces where people are coming together, where you can have those sorts of conversations in an organic way. You've got to do the graft to actually create them. And that is, it's one reason why I think this is such a great idea. The more we can get those messages out there that are just honest and truthful, and people can critique and say that's not enough, or I expect you to do more than that, and that's fine. But as long as we're starting from a shared basis of facts about what people who care about you, who represent you, who are your voice, are doing on your behalf, that sort of starting point of fact is so important.
I think that was one of the reasons I wanted to do the podcast, because you see so much on social media where people have a pop at people who don't know them. I had this conversation with Andy. There should be some legislation there. I think that's something we need to look at going forward. But we can get the message of saying it's real people. You've got a family. And things sometimes can hurt when people have a pop. And it's listen to people and chat about things. We can't always get it right. We'll never always get it. It would be perfect. It'd be great, wouldn't it? But we're here to help and do it. And your job going down Parliament is fighting that thing for Wigan and Lee, really, isn't it?
And that's exactly right. And in the campaign, this rumour got put out there. Don't know where it came from. I have my suspicions, but that I had something to do with Kent.
Okay.
Now, I think I've been through Kent because you get the ferry to France from there. Apart from that, zero connection to Kent. But it came up on the doorstep, I would say, 7-8 times a day. And, people would say some quite unpleasant things either side of the Kent thing. And I would think, well, look, it's fair enough for you to say where you're from, what connection do you have to the area, what you're going to do for me and for Wigan, and for the towns that you want to represent. That's fair enough. We can have that conversation. But let's start off by, ask the question, who are you? Where do you come from? And that can be, once something gets out that's just based on nonsense, it can really get in the way of, the genuine connection of representation where, people vote, they expect you to fight for them, but what they see you doing is based on stuff that's just not true.
So what's your vision for the next probably 3 years, if you like, leading up to the next election? We'll not talk about the next election. We only just got in here. What's your vision for your area, really?
Well, I basically want to get 4 big things done by 2028, 2029, whenever the next election is, or at least underway. A few of them I feel quite confident about. One of them I'm very, very nervous about. So one is, after those floods, there is a major flooding project that has been reviewed, promised, scrapped, delivered, for about 20 years, that stretches from Aspel, your patch, for a reservoir, and then will protect Hindley and Hindley Town Centre, and then all the way through Plattbridge and Abram. And then will make a difference to some of the surrounding areas like Bickershaw too. That project has to get delivered, and it has to get spades in the ground faster than 2034 or whatever it was before. And I will not rest until that gets the green light. It has got to be done. We can't build more houses in the area until we can show that we're not going to get serious flooding again. Plain and simple, as far as I'm concerned. So that's the first thing. Second thing, Hindley Green and Orrell both have a problem with primary care health provision. Partly it's just there's not GP practices in those places that are in those places, and partly it's this fantastic agenda of prevention and testing and diagnostics that both the Wigan Writing and Lee Trust and also Wigan Council have been pioneering. Those are areas that could really benefit from that. So what I want to see really is new primary care provision in both those places. I think in both instances we're going to need to think about where that happens, and there's been some really exciting developments that, you know, I can't talk about them publicly yet, but they are coming down the track. I've been pushing hell for leather for in both places, where we can have, you know, potentially a site for new health provision, and that would make me really, really happy to see Orrell and Hindley Green benefit from some new health and wellbeing provision in the area that everybody can see and that are sort of tangible and easy to access for residents. Then there's antisocial behaviour. That's the third thing. Now, this is not something, unlike the health centres and then the flooding projects, where I can focus on getting something delivered. I don't have control over the, you know, so-and-sos who are driving these dirt bikes around St Jude's. But I do want to see a visible police presence. I do want residents to feel like police are being responsive, and that's why I have a very regular meeting with Claire Jenkins, the Chief Superintendent for Wigan. And I particularly am excited about the new powers that we are going to give, not just the police, but also the council and housing associations, to deal with that antisocial behaviour, respect orders in particular. So I want to really make every town that I represent feel like antisocial behaviour is taken seriously, that all the relevant authorities have the power to do something about it, and they will listen when cases are raised. And then the last thing, big thing, big price tag on it, and I don't know whether I can get this done, but I'm going to push for it with everything I've got, which is, as you know, you've been around a long time, so you will have seen this, many iterations of this project, but the M58 hits the M6 and then it stops. And there was supposed to be a link road that goes all the way through to the M61. So if you're coming from North Manchester and going to Liverpool, you'd use this road. At the moment, the town centre, but also Ashton and Hindley Green, they get so much traffic because this road never got built. And again, it's another example of a project where actually things have been promised to people, they've been scrapped or broken up into bits, and they just have not been delivered. And people feel, you know, when I ask people about that link road, they say, yeah, you know, they just won't believe it's going to happen. Yeah. We can't let that sense of disillusionment and sort of fatalism almost, I'm not going to let that sit. So I don't know if it will get delivered at the spending review coming up. What I want to hear from the government is a clear strategy for building roads. You know, we can't just be building solar farms. We need to build roads. People drive outside of London. I drive everywhere all the time. So we need to build roads, and I want to hear from them an explanation of whether this road project is in their pipeline or not, whether it's they're actually going to earmark some funding for it. I want a really clear update on what's going to happen with that road, when and why, and I want to be able to communicate that back to the people I represent, because we will not sort out the traffic problem in most of the towns I represent unless we build that road.
So I think traffic, off-road motorbikes is something we all deal with across the piece. It's quite hard to deal with in our kind of, but I'm sure we'll get there at some point. But I think the one thing that we all have an issue with is health. And when I'm speaking anywhere or doing anything, no matter what we do in life, as politicians, as anybody, there's nothing more important than health, because without your health, you've not got anything. So I'm glad that you're kind of trying to tackle them issues, and I know combinedly with the 3 MPs and the council, we'll have that bigger shout to kind of go to government and say this really needs doing, but A&E needs a real great sort out. We know all the issues around there. So I'm glad we've got 3 strong MPs, we've got a strong council with David leading it to kind of try and make them changes. So thanks for raising that. Thanks for coming on the podcast. And hopefully people listening to this will have heard from the real Josh. And people who didn't know Josh before will now feel like they know him. You'll be in their front room so they can actually see you and hear you. So thanks very much indeed.
It's my pleasure. I will never hear the end of that rugby union secret I let slip there.
No, we've got rugby union in Aspel, mate.
Yeah.
Hopefully people listening to this will have listened to Josh. His door's open, his phone's open, his office is open, so everything's open if you want to contact Josh in that area. And hopefully things are really moving forward. But thanks again to the college for all the work they've done behind the scenes. Thank you.